Okay, calm down. You got limits, man. You got limits, man. Okay, calm down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We are so excited to be here with you. We have a great show for you. It is jam-packed with all sorts of great discussions, great guests, and we are traveling from the United States to the Americas, of which the United States is part, but we're going to go around the Americas. We're going to go to Brooklyn. We're going to go to Palestine, figuratively, obviously, with our discussions. During the second half of the show, I'm going to be joined by Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, who is an anti-Zionist rabbi. You guys are all fans of him. Whenever I have him on, people ask for me to bring him back on, which is always a great sign. He's going to talk to us about why he and others protested the arrival of Itamar Ben-Gvir in New York City, and he delivered an excellent speech that I tweeted out parts of it, and people were really excited by it and moved by it. We're also going to be joined by Jennifer Koonings, who is a psychiatric nurse practitioner, who is also a pro-Palestine activist, and she was at the anti-Ben Gvir protest where we saw a lot of violence. If people don't know about that, definitely stay tuned because you're going to want to see that. Not surprisingly, you had a bunch of Zionists who pretended they were defending themselves, and when they say they were defending themselves, they mean that they, harassed and physically attacked a woman who was on her own, spat at her, threw traffic cones at her, et cetera, et cetera. That was just one of the attacks that we saw. So that's going to be during the second half of the show. We're going to focus on Zionism, on Israel, Palestine, on Judaism. But during the first half, we're so excited to bring back onto the show the great historian, Greg Grandin. Before I bring Greg on, I want to just encourage people to please give this a thumbs up. Give it a like. That's a great way to support the show. If you can become Patreon supporters, we really appreciate that. That's at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. If you haven't already subscribed, please do subscribe. Hit subscribe and then the bell. And we're going to have a great Patreon for you this week. I'm going to leave you in suspense. It'll probably be released on Friday, but it's going to be about Jeffrey Epstein and the death of Virginia Giuffre, which just happened. I'm sure people who follow that story know about it. So that'll be your Patreon. Also, we're going to be playing the part 2 of our interview with Oliver Stone next Tuesday. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our first wonderful guest. He's professor of history at Yale. He's the author of a number of prize-winning books, including The End of Myth, From the Frontier to the Border Wall in the Mind of America, which I have right here. But he also has a new book, which I have, but I left it upstate. But I can tell you it's very good. It's an excellent book. It's called América. We're going to talk about that, as well as current events, Latin America, immigration, and so much more. So welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Katie. Well, it's great to be on the show. I have a copy of the book to show.
Oh, good. Thank you. Okay. And what happened is Greg kindly, what is it? It's América. And what's the subtitle of it?
A New History of the New World.
A New History of the New World. It's really good. I have it. I left it upstate. So what I did is after leaving upstate, I got it on Kindle and I also got the Audible. So I've been like alternating between reading it. Well, I read it physically, which is always the best way. And then I've been reading it on Kindle and on Audible. And I wish we lived in a world where those things were made by non-Amazon. Alas, they're not. But soon, next time I can do it. Someone should develop some of those apps. I bet Brad, you could do that. Make a non-Amazon Kindle and Audible. He's giving me the thumbs up. All right. It's all happening. So there's so much that we could talk about. And what I love about your work is that you obviously are very grounded in history, but you also make all the connections to what is happening today. So I want to start off by asking you, what made you write this tome in the first place? Because you've written so much, and I mean, I'm very appreciative of it because for me, I learned a lot of new things. But what made you say, "Oh, I have to write a new book, and this new book is going to be about ABC"?
Well, it is a tome. It's close to 800 pages. It's 50 chapters, and it starts with the conquest and it ends with Gaza in a way. I mean, I mentioned Gaza in the epilogue. It's a kind of coalition, kind of culmination of ways I've been thinking about Latin America for quite a long time. A lot of the kind of books that I've written on US's relations in Latin America, its interventions, its foreign policy, has tried to go beyond thinking about Latin America as just a place that the United States intervenes in, in morality tales. We all know them: Guatemala in '54, Chile in '73. I mean, you can go on, right? We just know the Central America in the 1980s. And in some ways, the U.S.'s support for death squads and disappearances overwhelms, I think, swamps out the ability to analyze and think about the role of Latin America in U.S. history, in the in the ways in which Latin America, first the rivalry and tension between the Spanish Empire and the British Empire, and then independent Spanish America and independent Republican United States, kind of was very, in a way, very productive. Like it created new ways of thinking about the world. And the argument of the book is not just that, oh look, Latin America is important. Like Latin
We've
America,
established that.
inform them. Oh yeah, we should think more generously about Latin America. There's a more specific argument about how centuries of a kind of competition and war and ideological conflict created more or less the terms in which we think of as organizing the modern world, the world that was put in the liberal order that was put into place after World War II, that Donald Trump is now both accused of and I think actually doing, dismantling the rules-based order, the liberal order, whatever you want to call it, was largely a product of the New World, and that's a kind of innovative argument. Most people write about the United Nations or liberal internationalism. They tend to look at Europe. They tend to look at Europe's relations with its decolonizing nations. Then they tend to look at the great powers. But the argument is, which we can get into we get into the details, but the argument is that it really does come out of the tension. And the book spans, like, even though it goes from the conquest, the Spanish conquest in the 1500s to today, it has a climax, and the climax is World War II.
Right.
And this moment of convergence when the United States and Latin America kind of come together under the Continental New Deal. And then, of course, there's a long coda, which is the Cold War, and then neoliberalism, when all of the good things that were created during that convergence, are destroyed and taken apart. And we can talk about that.
Yeah, one of the major points that you focus on, especially, during the beginning of the book, is the difference between Spanish and English conquest. Can you talk about that difference and what the legacy of that is today? Yeah.
Well, first of all, Spain got to the New World 100 years before the British did. Not exactly, but roughly a century. And they established, the Spanish conquest was incredibly bloody and caused suffering that it was unimaginable of the people who were here. Demographers, one demographer calls it the greatest human mortality rate in world history. There were probably 90 million people living in the New World. By within a century, 90% of them were gone. And the first wave were gone because of the wars of conquest and enslavement and forcing Indians to extract silver, to work in the fields, to dive into the oceans for pearls. And that first happened in the Caribbean, then it happened in Mexico, then it happened in the Andes. And then once colonialism was established and Spanish rule was in effect, then the diseases came. The European diseases wiped out, million epidemics and that claimed the lives of millions in any given cycle. So by the end of the by the end of the 1500s, there was 90% of 90 million were gone. So the point of this is two things. One is that Spain had no presumption that it wasn't ruling and conquering a people. They knew there were people in the Americas, and they knew there were a lot of people in the Americas. Some people thought that Bartolomé de las Casas, who plays a big role, thought there was more people in the New World than there was in the Old World. And he was wrong about that, but, there were millions. And because Spanish colonialism presumed to be a universal religion, a universal monotheistic religion that was the bearer of all the world's knowledge and all the world's history. The fact that there were so many people living outside of the Catholic domain and nobody knew about it created a kind of crisis within Catholicism that was augmented by the violence so people like Las Casas, and I use him, but not just Las Casas, other Dominicans and then later Franciscans and Jesuits.
And by the way, Greg doesn't mean people from the Dominican Republic. He's talking about
I'm talking about the Dominicans.
Catholically
Yeah,
speaking,
I can tell that
Dominican
joke
people.
I told on Chapo. Maybe I'll tell it later.
Oh, okay.
About the Dominicans. Yes, the joke is I'll tell the joke.
Okay.
So the Dominicans and the Franciscans and the Jesuits are hanging out, and the lights go out, and the Dominicans say, well, we'll sit here and we'll meditate on the meaning of lightness and darkness, and and the Franciscan says, we'll sing a song to lightness and darkness, and the Jesuits said, we'll be right back. We're gonna go change the light bulb.
Nice.
So the way the Jesuits were a little bit more effective, and they were more
hands-on.
practical. Yeah, hands-on and practical.
Right.
But to get back to the thing,
and De Las Casas, just for people who don't know, some people may know about him. He wrote that harrowing account of what happened in the New World, and a lot of the crimes that we know about that were committed by Columbus, right, were based on the writings of De Las Casas.
Yes. He wrote, and it was published. The Spanish conquest corresponded with the creation and spread of the printing press. So it was the first conquest that was told in detail, and not just by Las Casas, by people who defended the conquest.
Right.
Or thought they were defending the conquest, but telling stories of gore, colonial gore, that were just horrifying. But Las Casas was translated into English, and it was used to kind of solidify the black legend that made the British out to be better than the Spanish in all sorts of ways, which we can go into. But the getting back to the point is that there emerged a kind of critical dissent centered around De Las Casas and centered around other Dominicans that basically, just to cut a long story short, questioned the legitimacy of the conquest, insisted that all humanity was one and equal, that there was that Native Americans were fully human, and had the same rights that Europeans had, whether they were Christians or not, and that war waged against them was unjust. And I'm not saying that this critique ameliorated the conquest, even though it did kind of galvanize the Catholic Church in Spain and did create, a lot of hand wringing. The conquest went on, and colonialism went on, and Spanish colonial state was created. But what was created, and this is going back to remind viewers about your question, the difference between the British and the Spanish, is Spanish Catholicism created an empire that was founded on universalism, the presumption of universalism, but acknowledged difference. It was administered around Native Americans, and Native Americans were the center. They were the center in terms of they created the wealth of the empire. Nobody could deny it. They extracted the silver from Potosi. They dived for the pearls. They cultivated the wheat and the sugar, but they were also the moral center of Spanish Catholicism. There was no evasion. There was no and some justified it, some condemned it. That Las Casian critique kind of goes underground, but it never really goes away. It pulls out the kind of emancipationist potential within Catholicism. Now, the British, 100 years later, when they want to get into the get into colonialism, they, Queen Elizabeth sent her pirates, Francis Drake and Hawkins and all of those pirates that she then knighted and turned them into lords, from but it wasn't until the early 1600s that London is really looking to establish colonies in what's Jamestown and Plymouth. And the Plymouth Company is sitting around having a debate in 1607, and they're saying, should we issue some document justifying what we hope to do, that we're going to bring Christ, we're going to bring the Protestant Christ to the heathens, to the savages. And they have this long debate, and the debate is all about the Spanish debate. Like, it's everything about this. Like, they're just obsessed with it. And basically they said the Spanish have been arguing about this for a century, and they can't justify Spanish colonialism. So maybe it's better we don't say anything. And so, that's the kind of evasion. So if Native Americans were in the center of a moral complex, imperial complex that either justified or condemned it, the British were like, we just won't think about it. And that played out in terms of the social form of British colonialism. Because by the time the Puritans showed up in Plymouth, they were like, oh, where is everybody?
Right.
There's these houses here, these fields are here. Oh, it's so great. God sent the pestilence 10 years before us to wipe out the Native Americans, and so they didn't. So there was a sense of there was no qualms, there was no moral crisis, there was there was nothing anywhere near. I mean, there was a few Puritans who raised issues, maybe we don't have to kill them all, maybe we can, maybe we're supposed to convert them, but it really was nothing compared to the Spanish colonial crisis and Spanish colonialism. And that tension between, wrangling with the conquest and with history and evading history runs through the book, and it runs through the wars of independence. So, Bolivar standing proxy, if we take him as proxy for, a whole generation of independent leaders of Spanish America in the 1820s, they saw the conquest as something to atone for. They saw Spanish independence as something to atone for. They thought the colonial state was, a monstrous edifice of immorality and that mocked law and reason, and they also, that whole critique that had developed against the Spanish colonial state early under Las Casas, they were the inheritors of it.
Right.
They understood it, and they were the inheritors of it. When the U.S. fought for independence, there was no sense that the American Revolution was atonement for the Spanish conquest. I mean, for the British conquest. Right, John Adams said we didn't conquer, we settled. And there was no grievances about the colonial state. All the grievances were laid at King George's feet, and chief among them is that they wouldn't let them settle west of the Allegheny Mountains. Old George Washington and Ben Franklin had already staked out large plots of land in the Ohio Valley because they wanted to speculate and sell it to settlers. And the British Crown issued a proclamation saying that there could be no white settlers west of the crest line of the Allegheny Mountains. And that was one of the that's not taught in schools, but that's one of the main motives of the American Revolution. Now, I'm not saying that things were wonderful in Spanish America. There was racism and there was hierarchy, and Bolivar was deeply depressed. I mean, he was like a kind of Sartrean existentialist. He acted. He led a 2-decade long, bloody, unbelievably exhausting fight against the largest empire and up until that point, and he won, but he didn't think that what would come would necessarily be worth it. He was very I guess we might there might be a diagnosis for him these days, but
Right.
I prefer to call him an existentialist. and because he saw both the doom and he said we're the product of we owe a debt to Native Americans, and most Spanish American constitutions did immediately constitute all of the peoples within any given polity as citizens, which of course the United States doesn't do, right? It doesn't do it for African Americans. It doesn't do it for Indians, right? Citizens are white men in the United States. So that's another example of the sociality of Spanish Catholicism leading to a more generous notion of what emancipation might look like. Now, of course, in reality, the reality was different. Bolivar freed all of his slaves. Most of them continued to work on his family's estates, and when the administrator walked by, they bowed their head and they looked at their feet. Freedom was was what it was. And so that's the tension that I kind of lay out in the book between the two. And then of course, one quick other I'll just this other quick other thing. Having thrown off Spanish Catholicism, the Spanish American leaders were immediately confronted with a new empire, the United States, which revitalizes the doctrine of conquest as it moves west to justify its moving west. And so Spanish American independence leaders and their successes and the intelligentsia and intellectual class, they had a whole ready-made intellectual critique of conquest that had previously been applied to Spain that they now directed at the United States. And that's why the Latin American critique of the United States is so profound and so enduring. It's intellectually rooted in this rich history of ideas, and it's socially rooted in the history of colonialism and of course dealing with the United States as it's taking Florida, as it's taking Mexico, as it's then taking Cuba and Puerto Rico.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I know that this is not the major focus, but you did mention racism, and I've always found this fascinating. The cast paintings that they did, which your book also mentions, where they have this very like pseudoscientific breeding chart almost, right? So it's like on the top left, it's a Spaniard with a Jew makes a with an Indian. Freudian slip. I read Jew. It does look like Judea, but India, it says, makes mestizo. Then mestizo with the Spaniard makes castizo. Then castizo with the Spanish woman makes Spaniard man. I mean, they go through all of these things. So there was a lot going on in terms of, I guess, like race science there. But
yes, without doubt. And I
wasn't suggesting you didn't know about this, obviously.
No. And this classification is certainly the foundation of ongoing racial hierarchies. Right. But it's also an example of the tension between a state that acknowledge that insists that it's universal, that it is absolute and universal, and yet organized. This is exactly what I meant by it administers difference. Right. It recognizes difference. It has all of these categories, and they go on and on and on, and they never end. And and they keep going. I mean, I have a list in the book, and they go on, and some of them are kind of funny because
turn back around.
Yeah, like so like what is it? Describe that, here's like 15 of them, right? Like originally it was supposed to be an Aristotelian symmetry between Indios and Spaniards.
Oh, okay. That's also something you would never see in like an English version of this, right?
There was a Republic of Indians and a Republic of Spanish. Right. Well, it turns out, like when they start having sex with each other, that breaks down pretty quickly.
Right.
There's like a Spanish and Indian beget mestizo and Spanish woman beget castizo. It goes on and on. Lobo, I don't even know what Lobo is. An Indian woman beget Zandiago. I don't know. Then it goes on and on and on. And the scribe had a sense of humor. Number 7 on the list was Torno Atras, which was the product of a 2 white child of a Spanish man and an albino woman. And Torno Atras means a step backwards.
Right.
Number 15 was the offspring of a coyote mestizo and a mulatto, which the scribe called Ahí te estás,
Right.
which in Spanish means "and there you have it."
Yeah.
But there you didn't have it, because it kept going on.
Right.
It kept going. So there was a sense that by the time you get to the 1820s, this
Oh, and here's no te entiendo.
yeah, no, another one was no te entiendo.
I don't understand you. Yeah.
So there was a sense that by the time you get to the 1820s, it's this attempt to reconcile universalism with difference just collapses under its own weight. You can't keep going on with these subdivisions. On the other hand, though, it is an example of this. There wasn't one Spanish independency that didn't want to cast all of this aside and just declare everybody a citizen. But they also knew that they couldn't, because they were products of a colonial system, and they recognized, that they needed an activist state, and it would take time to create citizens. And it's out of that kind of awareness that comes, and we could talk about it later on, how Latin America, it really is the gestates what becomes social rights, in political theory. We could talk about that later on if you want.
Yeah. Well, definitely. And I wanted to move, shift a little bit. And Brad, I may have to ask you to come in from replace me, because I may have to tend to my dog. But I'm going to ask Greg the question.
No.
But so
What's
Greg
the matter
doesn't feel like he's just barking, but I don't want Greg to feel like he's speaking into the abyss. So Brad can come in and you can talk to him. I want to ask you, speaking of Catholicism, one of the things that your book really exposes or gets into is the way that, the Catholic Church can act as a force of unthinkable evil and bloodshed, and then also as kind of a bulwark against slavery and genocide and displacement, through the teachings and writings of figures like Las Casas, or, Montesinos. And then, of course, we know people like Oscar Romero, and who was killed himself,
Right.
who was a liberation theologian. But where does Pope Francis, the recently departed Pope Francis, fit into this trajectory? Because from what I've read from you and from others, it's not quite as neat a categorization.
It's not. I mean, he was an Italian child of Italian immigrants. He was born in Argentina, and he came of age under Peronism, when the working class and the poor were entering the political arena and demanding social rights, when the state was building the social state. He had a sense of that. He became a priest in 1969, just as a lot of the kind of political effervescence was about to be destroyed by death squads and the anti-communist military regimes. Chilean coup is in 1973. The Argentine coup is in 1976, and he's the head of the Jesuit order. And it's a little murky. There's a long essay. It's not an obituary. Colm Tobin, that Irish writer. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
It was in London Review of Books, or maybe it was in the New Left Review. I'm not sure, but it gives a really good overview of this period. And there's questions about whether he did enough to protect Jesuits, and 2 Jesuits in particular. And there's a way to read his papacy as almost like an atonement for his failings. That it affected him, and he wasn't a radical. He wasn't a liberation theologist. He was actually quite theologically conservative. And so the question is, and there's even some rumors, the CIA intervened at least one other time in a conclave when it nudged the appointment of Pope Paul in the 1960s because they thought he would be conservative. They thought there's a story. I don't know if this is true, but I'm
Well,
going
I
to say
know.
it anyway.
Yeah.
There was a sense that he would actually be useful in clamping down on the Latin American left, which at that time, when he became Pope, was very strong. Chavez, Lula,
Right.
Kirchner, Morales, they were all there. And in the same way that Oscar Romero was a conservative, he was picked because they thought he would uphold the status quo. So there's ways in which social reality in Latin America radicalizes you. And he represents a certain kind of Latin American sociality that even, and so I don't know what accounts for him making such a deliberate stand for the progressive wing of the Catholic Church in the middle of the schism, because it is a schism. That the Christian right is insane, and it's part of this whole global fascist movement, and they think that Pope Francis was a pretender, and they think the Vatican is illegitimate, and they want it back. And and I don't know if they're going to get it back. We'll see. But he did take a stand, and he said some dicey, cringy things, and he fumbled about child abuse, particularly in Chile. Although he did have a complete turnaround in Chile, and he recognized exactly the depth of the problem, and he said he was wrong, and he basically fired the entire
Right.
upper class of the Chilean clergy. And so so he was as much a Peronist as he was, a Catholic, which is saying a lot and not much, because there's not really a difference between being a Catholic in some
Right.
ways, in your social view of your vision that the world. He's provided space for liberation theologians to come back. He invited Native Americans to the Vatican. This is another thing that sent the right wing off the rails. He had like an indigenous conclave in the Vatican walls. It would have been as if, Las Casas sailed a boatload of like Aztecs, Mapuches, and Mayans to debate issues of sovereignty and dominion and property in Seville in 1500s to Spain. He invited all of these Native Americans. They planted a tree. They did their Pachamama ceremony. They were in paint, and there's Pope Francis smiling. That was a big turning point in the hatred that the Catholic right cultivated for against Francis.
And shifting gears a little bit, wanted to talk about, because you just mentioned the CIA, so I wanted to ask you about coups. How would you describe what we just saw in Ecuador with the presidential election?
I mean, it's hard to tell. I'm not a statistician. I don't have any special insights. But she won they basically tied on the first vote when they each got 44%, and they got the same exact number of, I don't know, let's say 4 million. It was 4 million something, but let's say 4 million. And then a month later, after she gets this endorsement of the indigenous political party, a guy who ran in the first round and got 5%, which is a big deal, because Kahane is very skeptical of the non-indigenous left, but they supported her. What Gonzalez? No, Fernandez. What was her name? I'm sorry.
Luisa Gonzalez, right?
Luisa Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Gonzalez. And so in the second round, her vote increases 0. And then
Right.
he gets like 2 million more votes. And he's a Trump. I mean, he's a Bukele Trump, he's within that clown car. He's has close alliances with Eric Prince. Eric Prince was down there campaigning. Eric Prince, the the founder of Blackwater, and now whatever it's called, Academy.
Right.
And he was down there campaigning for him. He's a millionaire. His father lost to Rafael Correa during the height of the post-Cold War return of the left. And he dresses like Bukele. He's good on social media. He cultivates the conspiracism. There's a way in which the Latin American right, up until about 2 decades ago, was traditional. It was patrician. It was law and order. It was anti-communist, and they couldn't compete against the return of the left, Chavez and Lula and Morales and all of this. They couldn't compete, and so now they've been importing all of the culture war crap from the United States. The hands off our children, groomers, the gun culture, Bitcoin, this weird libertarianism, you see it in Argentina with Javier Milei, and you see it in now you see it in Ecuador. So I don't know if it was a coup. It was suspicious, and I think the Organization of American States, which is no friend of Latin American leftists, said there was serious irregularities. But it doesn't matter, because he's going to because it's this. It also is this kind of interlocking drugs, cartelization of national politics, in which corruption and violence and militarism are kind of fused. And up until before Ecuador, El Salvador was the model for that. Bukele's Bukele is not waging a war against the gangs. He's in alliance with the gangs. He made a pact with the leaders of the gangs. For them, he said, listen, I'm going to throw you rank and file in this prison. If you clamp down, if you tone down the killings of civilians, especially, you could still go about making your money, and and everybody can profit. And he's created quite a horror show in El Salvador, and he used to be a member of the FMLN, and he's a descendant, of Palestine Christians, Bukele, but who saw this coming, though? People have been people paying attention to Latin America for the last 5 years or 10 years have been complaining about Bukele. But nobody saw this alliance between, that all of a sudden he turned the country into the Devil's Island or a penal colony of the United States.
Right. And I mean, I heard you speaking, I believe, on Democracy Now! About how there's this culture of disappearances, right, which compounds the tragedy of killing people with this uncertainty and constant struggle and kind of search for what really happened to your loved ones, and you don't know. So that there's that disappearance, and you kind of compared that almost coyness around disappearances to what's happening right now.
Well, that meeting they had in the White House was disgusting. The giggling and laughing about the complete impunity and the suffering that they were causing innocent people. Yeah, right. Disappearances are like the signature modality of terror in Latin America during the Cold War. And one aspect of disappearances was the state would deny, we don't know where your son went. Maybe he ran off to Cuba, maybe he ran off with a woman, who knows? We don't know. And that uncertainty adds to the horror and the suffering, because there's just deniability. Now, we have them. Fuck you. We're not giving them back. I mean, it's a different kind of, the kind of fuck you impunity that is, that's just, you can imagine what the families of these people are feeling, the powerlessness, which is just an ultimate form. It's a scaling up of the it's a different order of terror. I mean, not that the old order of terror was so great.
Right. But it's like there's no attempt at deniability.
Yeah. We have them, and we're not giving back. Oh, they're innocent. Yeah, we're not giving back.
Right. And what are your thoughts? I mean, I had an Uber driver the other day, a Lyft. I had to take one because I had Bucky with me, my dog, and I had to take him in that. Yeah, he's really cute. I'll show him later. But I had an Uber driver or a Lyft driver, and he had great critique of Trump and his, racism and how terrible he was being to undocumented people, or documented, as we're seeing now. But then he was from El Salvador, and this guy said how much he liked Bukele because he was, cleaning things up, making people safe.
Well, people are taught, people are poor and people are hungry, and people are tired of the violence, and in places like El Salvador, it was unbearable. I mean, you'd be extorted for running a small business, for being a bus driver. So there's a certain appeal there. Now, that said, the social democratic heritage of Latin America has been able to contain the right to some degree. More people live under countries, and I'm not even including Venezuela or Nicaragua here, but more Latin Americans live under governments that call themselves social democratic than they do under right-wing governments. But still, it's a powerful, the importation of the culture wars, in a society that in societies that are desperate and hungry, is a powerful attraction. And so it's like almost like it's the same kind of shit here. It's like more like world building conspiracism, rather than any attempt to establish a kind of stable legitimacy or hegemony, right? Like, it's just like, and it's, and the culture wars are impossible to wind down, because it's never about one thing. It's about grooming, it's about this, and then then it's about that, then it's about paper straws, then it's about and it's and it's the same, and the same terms are imported into Latin America, but then there's, but not everywhere, right? So I mean, this Bolivia, a lot of countries are on knife edges, like Lula won in Brazil, but just barely. But you have Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico. I mean, a child of Jewish refugees, communist Jewish refugees, a science, who climate scientist who is trying to revive the roots of the Mexican Revolution, the socialist roots of the Mexican Revolution. And she's operating in a very to the north. She has the United States. Within Mexico, she has like a class of super billionaires that became so because of the privatization of the 1980s and 1990s. And and then there's the military, and but it's amazing. Morena has been able to create a certain kind of electoral hegemony and legitimacy that has now run through 2 presidents, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. And it's all basic stuff, like we're going to send doctors to old people's houses to check in on them, and we're going to expand neonatal care, and we're going to it's just basic social welfare stuff. And
right, keep going. Sorry.
No, that's
you write in the I believe it's in the epilogue of your book, but it's towards the end. It's excellent. Again, really great book. Latin Americans know that the best way to beat fascism now is the same as it was back then, by wielding liberalism to a forceful agenda of human rights, by promising to better the material conditions of people's lives. So is that kind of Scheinbaum's strategy?
Scheinbaum, and it's a contrast with the Democratic Party, obviously. Bernie Sanders notwithstanding, the denial. I mean, it's almost as the denial of the Democratic Party is almost kind of like that London Virginia Company in 1607. It's better we don't put anything out. We won't let them know what we stand for. And the debates, I don't know how influential these Ezra Klein types are going to have, but like the idea that, I mean, the New York Times, for a long time, I was saying, somebody's got to write an essay why the Democrats need their own Project 2029, and like it's got to be filled with like Medicare for all and national daycare, and paid paid maternity leave, and all of these things, like a moral agenda to match the amoral whatever it is that Trump represents. And
like,
you know, and the New York
celebrated in
Times, right,
more and
finally
more.
has an article. Democrats need a project 2029, and it was all about how they had to deregulate and have
Right.
better customer service. It's like, it's
Yeah,
like,
you kind of can't make that
you
up.
know, it's unbelievable. I mean, the thing about Bernie Sanders, and you say it again, is I know all of the problems and faults of Bernie Sanders. I read Alexander Coburn for quite a long time.
Yeah. So you're prepped on that. Yeah.
He didn't like Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders' focus on political economy is the only way out of the culture wars. It's the
Right.
only way out of, the left can't win the culture wars
Yeah.
because, or not even the left, the Democrats can't win the
Right.
culture wars. And by focusing, by constantly bringing it back to things like, because that is intersectionality, right? National health care is intersectionality.
Right.
And it's the only way of breaking out of the insanity of the culture wars in this country that has given us Trump and has paralyzed the Democratic Party. But of course, there's Gaza, and which is the other thing.
Right. Well, actually, I want to show. So you actually you replied to a Cory Booker tweet, who loves his platitudes.
I'm glad you're watching my tweets.
Yeah. Cory Booker writes, "We must stand up and speak out, not because something is left or right, but if it is right or wrong." And you wrote, "Gaza is fascism. If you are not opposed to Israel's genocide in Gaza, you are not opposed to fascism or authoritarianism anywhere." So can you expand on this? And do you ever get
because Cory Booker just, everybody celebrated his filibuster over nothing. He beat Strom Thurmond's record. Oh,
yeah.
Okay,
and
great.
he also, by the way, after that, he went off and voted to approve
He voted for military spending in Israel, and he didn't say anything about Gaza. I mean, I'm of the opinion that Gaza there's lots. I'm not saying. I don't know what the Democrats have to do to win. I'm not saying they have to all turn into like Jewish voices for peace to win the next election, but they do have to somehow distance themselves from Biden and Harris. And the problem with Harris, Gaza is a moral atrocity that Biden and Harris should be held accountable for eternity for.
Yeah.
But the other thing, just logistically, strategically, is it set a limit on what she could say. Like she couldn't rebuild that center-left coalition that Biden won on in 2000. It forced her to the right because she wouldn't distance herself. So she had to embrace the Cheneys, and she had to embrace the millionaires. She couldn't, because if she went to the left, she'd have to deal with Gaza.
Right. Yeah.
And she wouldn't.
In her lot on the other side.
So it pushed
her chicken and egg, though, I think also.
What?
Right. I think it's a bit chicken and egg also. Like, in other words, she was not ever going to totally go. I mean, apparently there's this one article, who knows if it's true, but that she was starting to talk about class more. And then her brother-in-law, who's like a CEO at Uber, was like, you don't do that anymore,
Tony, Tony,
and then,
whatever his name is.
Tony West. And then you have, that article that showed Biden telling Harris he didn't want any daylight between their policies, which is just like the most, it's not surprising because all these guys are like basically sociopaths, but to see that, apparently that's more norms and his legacy are more important than defeating the person who these people framed as a fascist. And I do think he's fascist this time. I didn't really think it the first time, or at least he wasn't as overt in his fascism the first time, which isn't to let the Democrats off the hook for how they helped pave the way for this. But, the idea that it's more important to protect Biden's legacy than to defeat this existential threat, or there was someone who worked for her who told the Pod Save guys, this wasn't even a hot mic moment. Like, she thought it was okay to say it out loud, which is something along the lines of like, it's not polite to break with your president, when you're the vice president. Like, okay, well, great. So now we have Trump.
So the Democrats stay home. So it's and then we have now a whole cohort of like Vox boys telling us that she lost because she listened to the groups. The groups.
Yeah. And what about two more questions that I have, and I could talk for so long. So thank you again, and you have to come back. We can do a book. We should do a book group with you. But
That'd be good.
two more questions. One is, what can you tell us about? Well, I want to actually show two clips from that meeting that you mentioned between Bukele and Trump. So let's take a look.
Well, it's an honor to be here in the Oval Office with the president and leader of the free world. We're very happy, and we're very eager to help. We know that you have a crime problem and a terrorism problem that you need help with. And we're a small country, but if we can help, we will do it.
President, do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country.
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to have suggested that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always how
can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
How many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible. And I just asked the president, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please?
Okay, can you respond to that one?
Well, that's what I was talking about. I'm president of the free world. The free world is, I mean, it's what's there to say? We've talked about it. I mean, it's just obscene. Latin America has long been. I mean, Latin America is a lot of things to the United States, and one of the things it's been a repository or receptacle of the kind of cast-offs that don't fit into the imperial schema. In the 19th century, there was lots of plans to shift free people of color to Central America and other places in Latin America, and they thought that might avoid a civil war. And then after the Civil War was won, there was schemes to ship emancipated former slaves to Latin America. And then obviously there's the use of Guantanamo, to absorb the Haitian refugees during the crisis in the 1990s, and then enemy combatants. These new categories that the legal system, that legal characters, that the legal regime doesn't account for. What do you do with them? Well, you just ship them off somewhere, And it's I don't want to make too much of a kind of circling back to the argument of like the essence of the United States is to push its problems to the frontier, but in some ways this is certainly a symbol of it. It's not going to be anything substantial in terms of hundreds of thousands of people, but it's at least symbolizes the notion that like we deal with our problems by just casting them off, by pushing them beyond the boundary.
Right. Well, last question for you. Turning to the other side of the political spectrum, we just talked about Bukele. Let us talk about Jorge Eliécer Gaitán, who, by the way, is one of the chapters in your books focuses on his death. But I also have to say that I speak Spanish to the extent that I do. I've lost a lot of it, but I did speak it fairly well. And that is because I had a Spanish teacher, Sol Beatriz Gaitán, who I would rearrange my schedule when I was in middle school and high school to make sure I had her for my Spanish teacher because she was so interesting. And we're good friends. And she's the niece of Gaitán. And she and I are still in touch. So Sol, I know you're watching this later on. So hi, we're saying hi. Tell us about Gaitán, his significance. Why is it that more of the world doesn't know about him? I mean, I think I heard him referred to obviously by Sol in your book. Garcia Marquez talks about him. I was in Venezuela and in like 20 years ago, I heard Chavez. I was at the World Youth Festival. I heard Chavez mention him. Tell us about the significance of this figure.
Well, I wanted to use him as a symbol of the kind of coming apart of the wartime anti-fascist alliance, and Gaitán was a liberal. He was a radical liberal within Colombia's Liberal Party, and he was presumed that he would be the next president of Colombia in 1950. And just to give readers a sense of context, he made his name speaking out against the banana massacre, United Fruit Company, that becomes the endpoint of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, a fictionalized version of that. He became the kind of an advocate for rural poor, the violence that was directed at the rural poor, mostly by conservatives and increasingly by fascist conservatives, because this was the 1930s and became the 1930s and 1940s, and he became beloved in Colombia, and it was assumed he was going to win and win big. Now, in April in 1948, Bogota was chosen to be the founding of the Organization of American States, which was the culmination of Pan-Americanism. And it's also where the United States was hoping to get Latin America to agree to its Cold War policies of shifting away from anti-fascism towards anti-communism or anti-Soviet communism. And Gaitán was not I don't know if he spoke out on that particular issue. He was very much involved in rural violence in the countryside, and in the middle of the conference, he was assassinated. A man, Jorge Roa Sierra, came up from behind him, pulled out a nickel-plated gun, and shot Gaitán in the middle of Septima Avenida, which is a big commercial street that everybody was on it, and Bogota exploded. And it's this moment, it's the kind of, I use it in the book as a kind of compressed moment in which the hopes of the post-war world come. And the riot lasted for over a week. George Marshall was in Colombia presiding over the Organization of American States. He hunkered down. He made a decision that the conference was going to go on. He saw it as a good opportunity to get Latin America to sign on to its anti-communist provisions, which he did. Eventually Bogota was pacified. But it wasn't clear who. It seems like he was probably killed by conservative Colombians. The CIA was really just getting started back then. I don't think the CIA was involved. Maybe, who knows? And he becomes the symbol of lost hopes and dashed hopes. He becomes, and in many ways, like JFK does. Every country has. Not every country, but it's almost like a requirement for modernity to have had an assassinated leader who represents what a country could have been, and involved in some conspiracy about who killed him. There's a million conspiracies. Fidel Castro was there as a young student. Everybody was there. Gabriel Garcia Marquez was there. It was a key. He writes in his memoir that it was a key moment in his political awakening. And also his storytelling. It just kind of, and then of course it gives once Colombia is pacified, because liberal elites and conservatives come together and they pacify. The Colombia falls into a 10-year civil war. It's called La Violencia. I mean, it's hard. Colombia has so many of these cycles of violence, it's hard to distinguish one from the other. But from 1948 to about 1958, there was a 10-year period that's called La Violencia. Right. And about 200,000 people died. And that pretty much was kicked off by Gaitán's execution and the Bogotazo, as the riot was called.
Which is like the big Bogota. It's hard to translate that word. It's like the big Bogota thing. Yeah.
Bogotazo. And that cycle of violence was ended with an elite pact between liberals and conservatives. Okay, we're not going to kill each other anymore. We're going to try to establish order. But by then, the FARC had already been the FARC emerges out of these roots. You know, even before Gaitan's assassination, the peasants had organized themselves in anti-communist units, and so it turns into a more traditional insurgency against peasants after 1959. And then, of course, the United States gets involved, and then the Cuban Revolution happens, and then cocaine becomes a variable, you know, in the 70s with the spread of cocaine production out of Bolivia into the Andes. So it's a moment. It's a moment that kind of captures in many ways it's the climax of the book, that and I use it to kind of set up the switch from, you know, that period when the United States was supporting the left against the right to the turn. In Latin America, the line between fighting fascism and facilitating fascism is very fungible. And the United States for a long, you know, when the United States supports the left, in the fight leading up to World War II, there was wonderful things that happened that came out of that. And then, of course, the promise was not redeemed. The promise was negated and voided, and the Cold War, and then neoliberalism, and then the failure of neoliberalism, and then then everything that we have now.
Right. Right. Well, and this, by the way, was an image. Sorry, I was muted before, but where's that image? I just had it of a burning tram. Let me bring that back up. This was one of the images.
And yeah, Gaitan isn't as famous as Allende or Arbenz in Guatemala or Castro, but he was of that. He was of that moment. He was a populist. He was a left-wing populist.
It's interesting that Castro was there when he was killed, just like Che was in
Guatemala,
he was in Guatemala with the coup and Arbenz.
Yeah. Well, the networks of, the post-war networks of, because people thought World War II that the fight against fascism in Europe would continue in the Americas, that they would take out Somoza and Trujillo in the Dominican Republic and Batista in Cuba. So there's, there was a lot of movement to continue the anti-fascist fight within the Americas.
Yeah.
But then the United States made its turn, and that wasn't going to happen. And so that radicalizes Castro's generation. It radicalizes somebody like Che Guevara, who's in Guatemala and flees and sees the coup happening. And when at the end of Motorcycle Diaries, that's when he goes to Guatemala, and he's in a rural clinic, and he's administering. He's watching the coup unfold, and he's writing to his aunt and his mother. His mother was an anti-fascist, and he's saying, Arbenz is letting these papers print whatever they want. I would shut them down immediately. It's clear it's the CIA. And so, he takes refuge after the coup in the Argentine embassy, and he makes his way. He gets released into Mexico. That's where he meets Fidel Castro, and the rest is history. But, in Cuba, he would cite Guatemala and said Cuba will not be Guatemala. The history of like left authoritarianism, and that, you have to understand it in terms of cause and effect, right?
Right, of course, yeah.
There's Guatemala, then Cuba, and then you still have like people like Allende who think you can have democratic socialism, and and then Castro says, they're not.
And he learned the hard way that you couldn't.
Castro's like, you have to dismantle the military.
Right.
And then he's like, no. They will uphold the Constitution.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, spoiler alert. Didn't happen. Last question for you. Tell us about why and how the United States itself created MS-13.
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, my knowledge of it isn't deep. I think that during the wars of the 1980s, a lot of migrants were fleeing El Salvador, they were fleeing Honduras, they were fleeing Guatemala, and they were fleeing Nicaragua. Nicaraguan refugees were treated well because they were fleeing the Sandinistas, and the United States was
according to
war
her.
with the Sandinistas.
Right.
And so they were kind of treated like the Cubans, maybe not quite as good as the Cubans, but they were Salvadorans, Guatemalans, and Hondurans who were fleeing right-wing regimes that were allied with the United States were treated like criminals. And they were thrown into penitentiaries, and a lot of the gangs that are now famous were created in Los Angeles, as these kind of migration networks were criminalized and then shipped back, so it created these kind of transnational networks, and then of course Plan Colombia gave them a huge boost, because Clinton's spending billions of dollars to militarily eradicate cocaine production in Colombia did nothing to eradicate Colombia production, but it broke up the large cartels that had a semblance of like order and responsibility, and it created an incentive for gangs to get into the act. And violence becomes a premium. The more violent you are, the more you control territory and, the fighting with each other. So the fusion of the history of migration, the criminalization of Salvadorans, Hondurans, and Guatemalans in Los Angeles, and the drug war all kind of combine. Now, Nicaragua, I'm not carrying any water for Daniel Ortega. He's done things that are indefensible, but Nicaragua itself still has a certain kind of emphasis on social policing, community policing. Like the gang, as far as I know, I might be wrong about this by now. Maybe somebody will correct me. But the reason why Nicaragua didn't have a gang problem was because of the legacy of the revolution. And a certain kind of community policing that didn't necessarily stigmatize. I've heard that might be changing now. The gangs are everywhere. The drug problem is interpenetrated the highest level of politics in Brazil, in Ecuador, and in Chile. It's a thing, and it's a big thing. It's a big thing.
All right. Well, definitely so much more to talk about. People are really enjoying this conversation, so we'll have to bring you back on. And thanks again so much for the book, which is really great.
Yeah. Everybody should buy it. There it is.
Yeah. And of course, Greg is a Pulitzer Prize winning author. Forgot to mention that part. All right. Well, now you know that people are watching you for the right reasons, not because they're snobs who fetishize the Pulitzer. Okay. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thanks,
Have a good night.
That was a lot of fun. It's always great talking to you. Have a good night.
You too. Bye. That was great. Love talking to Greg. Knows about so many different things. Could talk to him forever. But luckily, that's not all we're doing tonight, because that's already a great conversation. We're about to bring you another great conversation. Now, before we do that, though, let's make sure people are giving it the likes that it deserves. All right, guys, if you're watching and you haven't liked it yet, please do give it the thumbs up. It's a great way to support this show and get the word out. We're going to bring on our next guests, who are excellent guests. And I'm not sure if will any of that be Patreon? I'm not sure. Let's just say we'll leave it in as an option that maybe there'll be some Patreon from tonight's show. In which case, if there is, then go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. But we're going to start the second segment of our show. And to do that, we are going to bring on repeat guest, show fave, Yaakov Shapiro, an international speaker, author, and pulpit rabbi, and the author of The Empty Wagon, Zionism's Journey from Identity Crisis to Identity Theft. We're going to bring in Yaakov, and we're also going to be bringing onto the show, making her Katie Halper Show debut, Jennifer Koonings, who is a psychiatric nurse practitioner, New York State certified sexual assault forensic examiner, and former ER nurse. She was fired from her long-held role for her long-held role as a sexual assault forensic examiner after the New York District Attorney's Office accused her of being a rape apologist, as well as the reason why a sexual assault victim she provided care to and testified in court 4 did not receive justice because of stuff that she had said about Gaza. She currently works providing mental health services to underserved women in the New York City shelter system. But we're not going to talk about that this episode. We're going to have Jen on to talk about that another episode, because that's a fascinating story. We're having Jen to talk about experiencing and witnessing some of the violence that we saw the other day. So let's bring on Yaakov and Jen, please. So excited to be talking to you guys. Hi. Welcome back, Yaakov, and welcome, Jen. So in case people don't know about this, what happened was, like, last week and through the weekend, the convicted terrorist supporter and inciter of violence and racism, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the Minister of Security in Israel, he did a speaking tour in the U.S., and his tour was met understandably and righteously with lots of counter protests. And there were clashes that broke out at multiple places, including in Brooklyn. So, and it was outside of the Chabad Lubavitch Center headquarters on Thursday night. That was where a big fight, big riot, I guess we could call it, took place. So I want to have Rabbi, can you set up what happened or the significance of these headquarters? And then Jen, you can tell us, as someone who was there, why you went out and what you witnessed.
Lubavitch headquarters. Lubavitch is one of the largest Hasidic sects of Orthodox Jews, or any type of Jews in the world. They were led by a very charismatic rabbi who many Lubavitchers, who currently deceased, who many Lubavitchers still believe is the Messiah and is coming back in one way or another. Right now they are leaderless. Nonetheless, their headquarters still remain 770 Eastern Parkway and the next door synagogue. That's the world headquarters of this movement. If you are anywhere in the world where there are Jews, Kalamazoo, Michigan, Jamaica, either Jamaica in the middle of the Caribbean, South America, anywhere there are Jews and you need some kosher food, there will probably be a Chabad outpost there to get it for you. They have a massive outreach all over the world. They're also very controversial for various reasons, which we don't need to go into now. That said, the headquarters is the world headquarters of this movement. This massive Jewish Orthodox movement is that building, 770 Eastern Parkway, and the adjoining synagogue.
Sorry. So I guess people were claiming that they were, like, under attack because there were protesters there. That was like the allegation. So Jen, as someone who was there, what say you?
So we only heard, like, super last minute that this terrorist was even going to be there. We knew that he was in New York. I think he had like a couple disruptions earlier in the afternoon, but I only see word, like, in an autonomous group that I'm in, that he was going to be there. And it was super last minute. We didn't know even if it was confirmed. And I live in Queens, and I was like, hell no, like, I'm still making my way out there, even if it's 9:30 p.m. at night. And we showed up, and there was only a small group of us. And I guess before we started making it known that, like, we were there, like, to protest him, it was very quiet outside. There was nobody outside, really. There was, like, a small, you wouldn't have thought that there would be anywhere close to the amount of people, like, that were inside that building. Like, there were only maybe a dozen of them, like, outside. But as soon as we kind of started chanting and, like, have, there were maybe like 8-10 of us at that point, like, maybe right at like 9:30, 9:45. And as soon as we started, like, even, saying Palestine or anything, it was just, it then became just a huge mass, and we were completely overrun. So I think maybe in total, like, the largest size of us that were there was maybe like 40 people. And there were probably close to 1,000 of, these Zionist thugs outside.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting but not surprising that this wasn't more in the news, because at the global headquarters of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, Ben Gvir supporters not only brutalized protesters, one being a Jewish woman with an Israeli passport, and another an Orthodox Jewish anti-Zionist protest, but also mobbed, assaulted, and chased a random woman down a block. We're going to get to that image because that was, unbelievable. But you didn't see that, Jen, right? What you saw was, can you tell us about what you saw?
When we first saw that,
show the video that you posted, yeah.
When we first saw, like, when I say we, like, I guess the other people that I was there with, like, when we first saw her video, like the lone woman, we were all, cause there were so few of us that we kind of like knew everyone who was there.
Right.
And we were all just like, who was that? Like, we didn't, she wasn't with us. And even when we were maybe there for in total like an hour and a half, and it just got to a point where it obviously was like too dangerous for us to be there. And we're watching, there were a lot of police there. There were at least, I don't know, there were dozens of police, but they weren't laying a single hand on them. And it was pretty wild to see. And we made the collective decision, like, we have to leave together as a group. Like, no one is breaking off. No one's staying. Like, we are leaving together. But that we were only there for like an hour and a half at that point. And I guess I'm forgetting like what your first question was.
Well, let's take a look at this because you posted some video of what happened.
Yeah.
I know a lot of you were asking about how the woman with the head injury was doing. I spoke to her. She's doing okay. As a former ER nurse and forensic examiner who has seen and assessed a lot of wounds, to me, it looked like she got hit in the head with like a brick. It was a very deep wound, very straight, profusely bleeding. She ended up needing multiple stitches. It was a concussive head injury. And I actually needed to call EMS from inside the mob and ask for help because, and by the way, she's Jewish.
Okay, so that is what these, people who value Jewish lives. Obviously, it's not okay if the person had been Palestinian. It just makes it extra ironic that she happens to be Jewish and have an Israeli passport. But imagine if this happened to a Jewish person who was, instead of protesting against Ben Gvir, was defending Ben Gvir. In other words, a Zionist Jew. Do you think we'd see more coverage of this? Maybe.
Actually, I think in the New York Times released an article about what happened the other day, and they did mention that there were 6 arrests made, and 5 of those were on our side. There was only 1 arrest made, and I saw, there were so many assaults that happened that night. And I haven't even gone through like all the footage on my phone. And that's with everyone that was there. And there were so many assaults that happened. The police watched all of us get assaulted. And the only person that they arrested that entire night that I saw was over a sound permit. So, even like that incident of it was just like unreal. I've been in the streets like for this and been in New York for a long time and have dealt with Zionists for quite a while now and gone to a lot of dealt with, I guess, that type of Zionists. Like I've gone to a lot of the protests over the illegal land sales. Like we deal with the Zionists, constantly, but this was next level. Like none of us, I don't think any of us ever expected that it would be this extreme, and not just that extreme, but seeing the police so blatantly, clearly there is some messaging that they're receiving to not lay a single hand on anyone. How do you watch someone? And there was even I got thrown to the ground. I got my Palestinian flag stolen from me, and then a grown man, probably twice my age, threw me to the ground. And there were police that watched it, and nobody did anything. But that's just one story out of dozens. And the event, the video that you showed of the woman that got hit in the head with a brick, that was blocks away from this, the Jewish supremacist headquarters. They were chasing us for blocks, and the police weren't doing anything. They were watching us just get chased. And then when this woman, they were the thugs, they kept breaking us up, trying to come in between us, they were throwing things at people, throwing eggs, throwing bottles, ripping hijabs off. I saw one of them even take the I'm so sorry, the Jewish like
Kippah,
religious
yarmulke.
practices, and I saw that and screaming things at us. You know,
Wait,
children.
someone took off someone
Yes,
else's.
I have footage of that too. And
So
then
someone
he
was
ran off.
wearing a kippah, a religious Jew,
Yes, they were. I mean, there were like a lot of the
observant Jews.
supportive Jewish supportive activists on our side,
Right.
and they even seeing like the way that those Zionists treat them, they're
Yeah,
especially disgusting to them.
Right.
And obviously
Traitors.
it's not about religion. Like it's never been about religion, but you know, that's what they use. But what I was saying about the when that woman got hit in the head with the brick, we were already like kind of all broken up, and there was so much going on. And then someone came to maybe like the group that I was in, like we were literally like just, you know, like comes to us and is like, you guys, like, we need to turn back. Like somebody got hit in the head with somebody's like, you know, it was emergency. Like we all like ran back, and then we all like surrounded her, and it, you know, even like that. And we had to call EMS from inside the mob. Like there's dozens of police. They're witnessing everything. This woman's profusely bleeding, and I had to call EMS myself. Like have you ever heard of that happening before?
No.
And then by the time EMS got there, I was an ER nurse, so I'm on the other end, like when the patient arrives, but I have never seen in my entire life EMS being called and EMS not going to the victim and not going and assessing the victim and taking the victim from where, you know, she's laying basically on the ground with a concussive head injury, and the police can't even like get the crowd under control. They make her get up. They make her walk to the ambulance herself. Like that's totally insane and inappropriate and dangerous, and it's actually completely like unethical, and I've never seen that happening in my life. Like she had a concussive head injury and she had to walk herself through the mob because I'm sure EMS like told the police like we're not going in there.
Right.
And then the police was just like, okay, like we'll just go grab her ourselves instead of doing anything to handle this like rapist mob.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely disgusting. And we actually have footage. So that was one woman who we know because she put it on her Instagram that she happens to be Jewish and has an Israeli passport. Then there was a woman who literally was not part of any protest on either side. I think she lives in Crown Heights. She was looking because she heard this. Yeah, she's a neighbor. She heard this noise, so she went out to see what was happening. And then when she saw people were filming her, she covered herself with a scarf. Let's take a look at this really disturbing footage. And she's being escorted kind of by one officer who uses like a flashlight, I think, just to like as a light, not really, you know. So there you can hear her getting hit with some, I believe at this point it's a traffic cone. Yeah. Okay, there's more. There's like 4 of them, Brett. There's some weird Okay, now this is the point of view from the woman who was attacked, and people who watch the show know that there's a theme where Israel supporters really like to talk about rape. They don't like to talk about the fact that it's committed by Israeli soldiers against Palestinians. They like to pretend it's committed when it's not, and they, regardless of that, they just really like threatening people with it or like fantasizing about it. It's very weird. Okay, so here we go.
There's some weird Palestinian. Is that you? You want someone to bend you over and fucking rape you like they're doing to the Jews in fucking Palestine? You're fucking insane.
Okay, and we got, I think, waste of semen, they're saying. and they're chanting death to Arabs in Hebrew. So disgusting. I still can't get over this happening. I know. There's one cop there who, for the first time ever, they used restraint. And then one more video we have, and this is of someone who was wearing, one of the people who was like wearing a yarmulke. So he's Jewish, religious, observant Jew. Let's take a look at how they treated him. Okay, so I guess I want to know, Yaakov, what is your response? And then we're gonna actually play a speech that you delivered protesting Ben Gvir. But I guess while Jen is still here, I want to ask both of you, I guess, what your response is to that. Like, you as someone who is a very devout Jewish person, what is it? And you're a member of the Orthodox community, and you see all these Orthodox Jews and non-Orthodox Jews, right? There, a lot of them are Orthodox, some of them weren't. What does it feel like when you observe these attacks?
Yeah, look, obviously, those the people that did those attacks are thugs, to say the least. There's nothing to discuss there. I do want to mention, though, watching the videos, not all of those guys were Lubavitch. There were apparently, based on what we just saw, especially the ones with the accents, the Hebrew accents, they apparently a bunch of people came to hear Ben Gvir, not
Right.
merely Lubavitch people, like that guy in the baseball cap, right? That guy in the white T-shirt. That did not seem to be a Lubavitch, and I must tell you, I am ideologically on the other end of the spectrum of these people. While they were hosting Ben Gvir, literally the same evening that these guys were hosting him, I also live in Queens, by the way. I was in Manhattan in front of the Israeli Consulate with hundreds of Jews protesting my words were something to the effect of dirtying this beautiful country with his presence.
Right.
Okay. That said, Lubavitch, like most other groups, are not a homogeneous crowd.
Sure, of course.
I cannot, I obviously am very opposed to their hosting this guy. Again, I literally protested his presence in our country at the same time, but they're not a homogeneous group. And I would ask not to judge all the Lubavitches by those thugs' actions.
Yeah.
Those thugs are thugs. The police should have turned around and put that guy in cuffs.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't.
Dragged him away wherever it was. Okay, why he didn't do that, I'm obviously unable to say. But that's absolutely a horrendous thing, and it shows once more something that we always know, something that Katie, I've mentioned on your show and other people's shows forever, that Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism.
Right.
Some of those guys were Orthodox Jews. They could be Zionists. Ben Gvir himself wears a yarmulke. And in my speech, I told him that if he wants to be a Zionist, he should take off his yarmulke and eat some pork. That's literally what I said. Because it's a betrayal of our religious beliefs. However, people have Jen, if you are you know psychology, so you know that human beings have the ability to compartmentalize and hold contradictory beliefs and behaviors at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the way people are, and there's absolutely no, no justification for that. These, yeah, and you see, it's not Jews that they care about. They were beating up that Orthodox Jew. They, and I don't know what they wanted from him. It's not even like he was carrying a Palestinian flag or something. I don't know exactly what he wanted, like what their problem was. Nonetheless, he probably, that, by the way, we missed that last scream right when the video was ending. It was probably the victim over there, the guy that was kicked. He screamed at them, Zioni, Zionist.
He
That
did.
was yes, that was the insults that he hurled at his attackers, Zionists. Okay, like that says it all. It's about Zionism. It's clear there are religious people, not religious people, rightists, leftists, all of these people. It's about Zionism. Anybody can choose to be a Zionist, whether he's Jewish or not, whether he's religious or not. Although if he's religious, it's like choosing to eat pork. That said, that's the way people are. The flesh is weak. Some people's brains are weak. That's the way it is. And I have absolutely no justification for harming innocent people, and that insult that he hurled at them, Zioni, that's what he said, Zionist. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
And by the way, I just want to show the Chabad Lubavitch spokesman, Rabbi Maurice Seligson, denounced both the anti-Ben Gvir protesters and the mob that chased the woman. So the violent provocateurs who called for the genocide of Jews in support of terrorists and terrorism outside a synagogue in a Jewish neighborhood where some of the worst anti-Semitic violence in American history was perpetrated and where many residents share deep bonds with the victims of October 7th, did so in order to intimidate, provoke, and instill fear. Okay. We condemn the crude language and violence of the small breakaway group of young people. Such actions are entirely unacceptable and wholly antithetical to the Torah's values. The fact that a possibly uninvolved bystander got pulled into the melee further underscores the point, he said. So, I mean, I would not agree with his description of the protesters, but yeah, of the.
I heard, by the way, that the official Lubavitch establishment was not involved in that greeting of that hosting of Ben Gvir. As I mentioned, Lubavitch is currently kind of rudderless.
Okay.
And
maybe I could step in.
You know what? You never know.
Yeah.
But the
prodigal daughter, yeah.
Yeah, but his statement that they were a break-off group of young, whatever he described, whatever adjectives he used, I have no problem believing that at all.
Okay, yeah.
This is not normal behavior for anybody.
Yeah, but it is stunning that it didn't get more coverage and result in more arrests. Jen, I want to thank you for joining, and also definitely come back because we're going to talk to you about your insane story. You're just yet another person who's lost a job for speaking out against genocide. But any final words that you want to share about this experience? And we'll definitely bring you back on to talk about the other story.
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically talking about the lone woman that was getting chased, I don't think that there's any woman that can watch that footage and just not, put ourselves in her shoes. Close to 1 in 4, 1 in 5 women in her lifetime will be raped. Most of us have experienced sexual violence in our life. And the fact that the NYPD watched this happen, watched all of us get mobbed, it's frightening. And especially for the women that live in that neighborhood, because, I have a friend that lives very close to there, and they're scared because what we saw that night was there's no accountability, and if any event happens like that, who's going to protect us? Because the NYPD was not capable of. So it just really goes to show that this needs to be a larger conversation about sexual violence in the city, about what the NYPD is capable of doing. It, at least from my experience, and not just that experience, is they're not capable of doing much. So, and this is a huge problem in our city, obviously, around the world, and people need to be held accountable. And yeah, like, I don't know. It's frightening. It's disgusting. And it's also disgusting that it hasn't gotten more media attention either, because every victim from Thursday night deserves justice. And it shouldn't be that hard to do, because, you know, we have CCTVs everywhere. Like, we have plenty of footage, like facial recognition. They know who did this. So, like, get to work.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jen, for going and for reporting back on what happened.
All right. Thanks so much. Thank you,
Katie.
Night. Thank you, Rabbi. Bye.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi, okay, want to play your response to Ben Gvir's arrival. I have 2 video clips. One I clipped myself from your video on Facebook. The other one was released by a Facebook group. I believe it's called Israel versus Zionism versus Judaism. Okay, it's not. Okay. So let's take a look at the first video where we see you and others gathered, and you can add whatever you think needs to be added to this description.
We're assembled here this afternoon because the well-being, and even more importantly, the very spirit of the Jewish people in the Holy Land are being threatened. These assaults on body and soul are being perpetrated this time not by Romans, emperors, or Spanish inquisitors, but by traitorous Jews, opponents of our people, haters of our religion, and deniers of our history. They want to destroy our values, unravel our religion, and rewrite our history. They want to do this by transforming our values into theirs, by replacing our religion with their ideology, and rewriting our history into their made-up version of the Jewish past. The ideology of these people is called Zionism. Zionism was designed to transform the Jewish people, body and soul, into something similar to those anti-Semites who the Zionists so deeply admired. Let's let the Zionists tell us what they think of the Jews. And I quote from Vladimir Jabotinsky, one of the founding fathers of Zionism, whose version of Zionism is the dominant one today in Israel. He tells us what a Zionist is. I know I am a Zionist, said Jabotinsky, because the Jewish people are a nasty people. Its neighbors hate them, and they're right.
All right, so that's you giving a little bit of a history lesson about the anti-Semitism that's so deeply embedded into Zionism, which you talk about. Wrong book. Which you talk about a lot in here. It's so big.
You had it on the shelf.
Yeah, I usually do, which you talk about a lot here in the Empty Wagon. And then we're going to play another part of that speech, because you make a really great point.
Minister of Security of Israel is currently dirtying this beautiful country with his presence. Ben Gvir regularly tramples upon the holiness of the Temple Mount, violating its sanctity, violating Jewish law, and compromising the safety and security of Jewish people. Minister of Security, all you've secured, Mr. Ben Gvir, by your behavior, is a designated place in the lowest pits of hell waiting for you. The only thing you've secured is endangering Jews. You are responsible for the police brutality against the non-Zionist Jews in the Holy Land. Jews follow the God-given religion of Judaism. Zionists follow the nationalist construct of Zionism. People like Ben Gvir, who claim to be religious. He wears a yarmulke like me. I have something to tell you, Mr. Ben Gvir. If you want to be a Zionist, Ben Gvir, take off your yarmulke, stop keeping Shabbos, eat some pork, and leave Judaism alone. Leave us alone. Don't say things and do things and make people think it's the name of the Jews.
Can you set up who Meir Kahane is and how he relates to Ben Gvir? And then we're going to play this clip.
Yes, Meir Kahane was a Brooklyn boy. I remember him well in the 70s, and he was from a rabbinic family. He studied in elementary and high school in very modern Orthodox Zionist schools. Went to BTA, that was Brooklyn Talmudical Academy. It was Yeshiva University's Brooklyn branch, but it was kind of like a low-rent school, you know. It wasn't the highest academic. He went to BTA, but then later he went to regular non-Zionist, even anti-Zionist school, got rabbinic ordination. And then, if I remember right, 1968, he founded the Jewish Defense League, the JDL. See, I was in New York then, and it wasn't so noticeable because when he founded it, I think it was right between 1969 when the New York Mets won the World Series and 1967 when Tom Seaver was Rookie of the Year. So the JDL didn't get much attention then in New York. But he found the JDL was officially an organization to counter anti-Semitism. I remember them having classes for kids in karate, self-defense. They would patrol Jewish cemeteries on Halloween night to prevent vandalism. But they were also lunatics. He was arrested many times, Meir Kahane. I think he blew up, he attacked or was planning on attacking a Russian embassy or some Russian property. And he was arrested many times, and he's an official. Then he left and went to Israel and became a politician, and he invented the Kach party. And it was based on the old school, the Jabotinsky right-wing Zionism, the Menachem Begin, this type of thing, but even more militant. He was very influenced in those days from the Black Panther group and from the Black Power movements. He was very, very influenced by them, and he believed that if the Jews would become more like the Black Panthers, then Jews would be proud Jews, and Jews would be not stepped on anymore, the same nonsensical ideology. Look, I'm all for self-defense, but that's not the same as blowing things up.
Right.
Okay, that's not the same thing as what Netanyahu's talking about. Show people, that's not the same thing as what happened to Crown Heights. Okay, not at all. That's not self-defense.
Yeah, right.
And it comes with this trauma, this paranoia, this overcompensation. It's insane. Yeah. And he originally did not get enough votes to get a seat. You need 1% of the votes in Israel, and he was eventually banned. He once got one seat in the Knesset, which he took. He was banned from the Knesset for being a racist party but in Israel. In America, I believe that the FBI considered his organization a terrorist organization, the JDL. I knew some of these guys. By the way, in yeshiva, well, I went to Jewish school yeshiva. We were the students. I was in high school in the 70s. We were not allowed to. We're teenagers, and you know how teenagers are. We were not allowed to have anything to do with Kahane or his organization. Anybody found having to do with him would be disciplined, and I don't know if they would be thrown out of school. Very possible. It never came to that because we all looked at Kahane as a maniac. Right. Kahane was a maniac. We had friends who were fans of his because there was, and there still is this misbegotten belief that like Netanyahu said, we don't want to be obsequious. We're Jews. We don't turn the other cheek, right? I'm not. You don't have to turn the other cheek, but you don't have to you don't have to blow things up. Right. So that's Meir Kahane. His platform was to get the Arabs out of Israel, and he falsely decided that this is what Judaism says. I remember once there was an interview. I once posted this on my podcast. Somebody asked him here in America, like it was in the 60s or the 70s, this old television show. It's on YouTube, this grainy video where the host asks him in this old host voice, this old deep broadcaster voice that they used to have, those kind of guys. He asks him, what would you do? What would you think if I were to say, you know what, there are too many Jews in America. Let's get them out, which is what he's saying about and Meir Kahane answered, you know what? It will be my dream if all Jews move to Israel. All Jews in America pick up and move.
Of course, yeah.
And that's always what the Zionists say.
Yeah.
When there was a terrorist attack in Paris, Netanyahu said, okay, everybody come to Israel. Copenhagen, come to Israel.
Right.
In
Even though
America,
they also claim that they're under attack all the time. And that's why.
yeah, they're always under attack. And the goal is
live here.
anti-Semitism for Zionists is a win-win situation.
Yeah,
it's win-win for anti-Semites, and it's a win for the Zionists because, and that's why they not only don't care about provoking anti-Semitism, they love when anti-Semitism is provoked, because what's their answer? Come to Israel. Meir Kahane actually said this on national TV, and his platform was get rid of the Arabs, give them incentives to leave. If they want to stay and swear fealty to Israel, but no citizenship. Well, that was his plan. No citizenship. They can have human rights, but no voting rights. If they insist on being citizens, and he said, if I remember right, that any Arab under, I think, 30 years old, he said, maybe off by a few years, would not accept that. So if necessary, if they don't leave through incentives, well, they'll leave through force. That's it. That was his platform.
Well, let's
take
a look at this clip of him, because you actually sent me a clip so we can see what Kahane sounds like, and then we're going to talk about. So you have Kahane, then you have Ben Gvir, obviously, and then we're going to talk about Baruch Goldstein, a protege, I think we can call him, of Kahane. We'll get into that later, though, right after this. Okay.
3 years ago, I served in the army in Samaria on the West Bank. In Ramallah, the Arabs rioted. So they sent me there to put down the riots. Now, I want you to know that not 5 minutes passed, the word spread through that town like lightning. Kahane's here. The rioting stopped. It's important that every one of you know what the name Kahane means to the Arabs. It means terror. They're afraid. And that's the only language they understand. And for those nice Jews sitting here who say, that's terrible, let me just repeat what Moshe Aarons once said to a group of UJA givers in Jerusalem. One Jew got up and he said, why must there always be war? Why can't we sit down with the Arabs, coffee and cake, and we work the problem out? And he said, sir, this is the Middle East, not the Middle West. That's right, it's the Middle East. And that's what the Arabs know and understand. If you're good to them, you're not good, you're weak. And if you're weak, you're dead. And if you're strong, they listen to you. I don't expect them to love me. I'm not the kind of Jew who walks around begging people to love him. I'm sick and tired of being, you know when people love us? After every Holocaust. That's when they love us. That's when they love us. That's when they give us plaques and monuments, and Jimmy Carter gives us a Holocaust commission. Well, I'm tired of Kaddish, and I'm tired of Yortzites, and I'm tired of plaques. And I don't want love, I want respect.
And I want to say something now. Mr. Kahane, where did this lifestyle, this approach, this ideology get him? He was assassinated in New York City, 1990. His son was assassinated about 10 years after that. That's where this lifestyle leads. Right. He wants respect. Hello. And yeah, Meir Kahane is getting respect for the Jews, right? Where's that getting you? Netanyahu is getting respect for the Jews. These guys are getting respect for the Jews. The Jews, we have to go out and protest the presence of Ben Gvir in this country because of the disrespect that idiots like Kahane and Ben Gvir get for the Jews. This is insane, this ideology. And then what's worse, to add insult to injury, injury to insult, both, is that these guys claim to do this in the name of Judaism. By the way, that he wants respect. He got killed. That's what
Right.
he got. He wants respect. Yeah, nobody, everybody's going to listen. You hear that? It's so.
Yeah, it didn't work
You
out
know,
so
look,
well.
I anybody's death is terrible. You know, I'm not. I'm not saying, but look where that got him.
Yeah.
That is a lesson to us all. Listen to those words.
Yeah.
You're strong, they listen to you. Or you're weak, they'll kill you. They killed him. Okay, they killed
Yeah.
his son. Right.
And also, it's a lot of people pointed out in the chat that it's true. I never thought about this. His mannerisms are kind of similar to Trump's. There is some kind of Trumpian. Maybe Trump studied him. I'm sure he met him back in
It
the
could
day.
be. And by
then-
the way,
yeah.
that line that he used, that's the only language that
Yeah.
the Arabs understand.
always
I
use
got
that
to
line,
tell you that phrase was familiar to me because, and I quoted this in my book, page 1144 in my version. There was a Rabbi Pinchas Segalau who was killed. He was beaten to death by the Israeli police in 1956 during a protest in Jerusalem. It was a peaceful protest. I'm quoting myself now. The Jewish police chief of Jerusalem testified about Rabbi Segalau's death under oath. Quote, Jerusalem, this is from the JTA, Jewish Telegraphic Agency. Jerusalem police chief Levi Abrahami testified today that the Neturei Karta, and this just means the ultra-Orthodox sect involved in the riots, understood only a strong hand. That's what they said about the anti-Zionist Jews. By the way, Neturei Karta then is not the same as the Neturei Karta today that you see at the Palestinian protests. They were an actual party in the anti-Zionist chief rabbinate in those days. These Neturei Kartas are named after them. But that's what he said. These guys only understand a strong hand. Jews. Yeah. And they beat the guy. They killed the guy. So, yes, I don't know what language. If Kahane and these guys are always saying that whoever they attack only understands one language, I don't know. Maybe they only know how to speak one language. This is, I remember, and I want to tell your audience that when I was a teenager, probably when Kahane said this, I don't know the date, but based on the fact that he wore his shirt outside, the collar outside of his jacket, the way we always used to do in the 70s, I think he did it subsequent to that also. But we were no normal Orthodox Jewish school allowed any of their students to have anything to do with his movement. He was looking for teenagers, that's what they look for. None of us were allowed to have anything to do with him.
He also used he wrote a book, right, called Never Again. That was his book, or was that just a slogan, which is like the exact opposite of what Never Again means to me, which is about, which when used by someone like me means never again can the Holocaust or something comparable happen to anyone ever, anywhere. It's not just about Jews. And for him, obviously, it was really the opposite. And I've talked about this a lot, that there is this Jewish kind of division over what that means. And for some Jews, it means never again is like, how can we possibly justify or let happen what's happening now in Gaza? And for other Jews, it's we're going to do anything that we can to prevent the deaths of Jews. But of course, it's not to prevent the deaths of Jews. It's really to prevent the deaths of Zionists, but they don't present those either, because as we just saw, he himself wound up being assassinated. But I want to show another lethal outcome of Kahane, because one of his proteges was Baruch Goldstein. Can you tell us a little bit about him, and then we'll show a video?
Baruch Goldstein was a doctor. He lived in the West Bank, and one day he snapped. He went into a mosque or a masjid. I'm not sure myself exactly what the difference is, but it's one of those. And he gunned down, I think it was 22, if I remember right, Muslim people in the middle of their prayers. They killed him. And they killed him. He didn't survive.
He was just killed on site, I believe. Yeah,
he was killed on site. This is the same ideology. These people don't do anybody any good if they think that they're helping Jews. They're just terribly, terribly misguided, and they're not. And I wish I could sit down with these guys and show them the error of their ways, which is one of the reasons why I wrote this book, This Empty Wagon, and it has over 500,000 words. I don't know if it's enough for them. For some of them, it is. They're very, very brainwashed, very indoctrinated.
Very brainwashed. Yeah.
And it's not,
or they don't really care. The other thing is that they're brainwashed, but they also don't really care about saving Jewish lives. Like that's the big.
No, they don't care, and they're willing to it's like die for your country and die for the cause. And you know what? I got to tell you, I mentioned this to you last time when I was on the show, that the Zionists they have this business of dying for the cause. And I ask people that they say that Israel and all the wars that it causes, never mind now Palestinians, never mind Arabs, never mind the people who are not Jewish, just the irony part of it, the amount of Jews that are killed and the amount of anti-Semitism that Israel causes. Israel is a liability to the Jewish people. There's nothing to discuss. Right. The question is how to, if there's a way to peacefully end it, that's a different story. But it's a liability. And they tell me, well, where are you going to run in case there's a Holocaust? And now we know that, never mind that the odds of there, God forbid, being another Holocaust the odds are right now, it's most likely to happen because of Israel.
Right.
Right. But aside from that, I ask them, what if there's not another Holocaust? What if in 1,000 years from now, if the Messiah doesn't come, there is no other Holocaust, and Israel continues their own death rate at this pace? Is it worth it? Like this insurance policy that you are paying in deaths, in wars of Jews. Never mind the Palestinians. We're talking to the hardcore Zionists now. I'm talking to Ben Gvir now, that doesn't care about anything. How many of your own people have to be killed? At what point does this insurance policy, in case there's a Holocaust, in case we're able to escape, in case Israel takes us, which is far from a given, in case all of these things happen, right? At what point does this insurance policy called the State of Israel become too expensive in terms of your own people's blood? Give me a number. If 100,000 Jews die, right now it's around 30,000, 100,000, 200,000. If 10 million Jews are killed in the next, X amount of centuries because of Israel, and there's no Holocaust, was it worth it, right? So the answer that some Zionists give me, because they never think in these terms, is it's worth it if all of us are killed, because at least we're going down fighting. We're not going like sheep to the slaughter. We'll all go down fighting. That's the thing. They're busy with going down fighting, about dying for your land. I saw an interview, I also quoted in my book, some settlers. They interviewed settlers and they said, it's dangerous over here. You have kids, you have your children over here, Well, and he said it's worth it, for the land, for being here on the land. It's worth the risk.
Right. Insane. Well, let's watch this video. We have two videos of Goldstein, who is a Kahanist himself. First, we're going to watch something about what he did, and then what happened when they tried to remove something commemorating him.
החברה שלי הייתי, אמר לי, טוב, יאללה, בואי נפרוץ לבית. לפרוץ לבית זה משהו מאוד שגרתי בשביל החיילים.
יודעים שהם אזרחים תמימים, הולכים שם ממש, מתרגלים מעצר לחלוטין, שהם ידעו כל הזמן שאנחנו שם.
יצאה תקנה שאסור לקיים לוויות בבית קברות. אז היינו מגיעים ואומרים לאנשים ללכת, אם הם לא שימו לקבור אותו, אז מישהו היה נשאר וקובר את המת. בזמן שבני משפחתו הולכים. יש תחליף לדבר בערבית שזה, לדבר עם הנשק, תלך משם לשם, הם היו הולכים די מהר, זה מאוד נדיר שמישהו מתחכך.
And by the way, this is from Breaking the Silence, which is an organization which documents the experiences of people who served in the IDF.
בוא תעלה איתי.
Okay, so now let's take a look at what happened when Goldstein, Bruce Goldstein, there was a monument to him, and they removed it, which was very painful because people really wanted to commemorate this murderer, this mass murderer, mass shooter. Let's take a look. So people are lying on this tomb that they're about to bulldoze. This was in 99. I think that's his father.
My son, my heart, you're tearing my heart out. What kind of country is this? I pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that no evil will befall our people or a tragedy like this. He gave up his life, his wife, his children, because he knew what was going to happen that day in the Marat HaMachpelah.
Could you understand what he was saying, Yaakov?
Yes, I do. He was saying that he's praying to God. First, he was.
And here's, oh, by the way, here's a scuffle, I guess, between the soldiers and the Goldsteinists. I mean, they're Kahanists, I guess, but
this is a barbarian act of a barbarian government that destroys graves of people. It's nothing in any place in the world it doesn't happen. Any place in the world, people don't destroy graves. And only in Israel.
So,
I think what was done today, it came too late, because no one should give honor to a murderer like Goldstein.
And
So, yeah, I'll tell you what he was saying. I remember this. He was saying that he prays to God that no evil befall the Israeli people. The Jews said, our people, because of this terrible act that is being committed, meaning removing the memorial.
Right.
He said, my son, meaning Baruch Goldstein, gave his life. He has a wife, he has children, and he gave his life because he knew what was going to happen in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. That's the tomb of the patriarchs. What he's saying is, and this is what Goldstein's followers always claimed, that Goldstein acted preemptively, that he knew of an attack, a terrorist attack that was going to happen, and he acted in order to prevent the attack. Now, there were numerous investigations. Look, I cannot. This is a grieving father over there. You know, you can't. A guy like that, you know, he must have been going out of his mind. That said, the Israeli government, as well as others, independent sources, made various investigations, and there was no evidence of that these people who were praying had any plans on terrorist activity. But Goldstein's followers to this day say that he acted preemptively, and you know that's
pretty
what
sure
father
if
was
evidence
saying.
existed, we'd see it.
Yeah, so the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, that's the tomb of the patriarchs. That's where Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the wives are buried. That's what this father believes. Look, you know.
Yeah, but it is. I mean,
there were investigations.
Yeah.
No, there was no. The government commission also didn't find anything. Israeli government commission found nothing.
Yeah, which is saying a lot because they would have loved to have been able to say that.
Yeah, it was. This is Zionist propaganda is, look, a lot of countries, I'm an American, right? And I remember when they taught us about the Boston Tea Party when we were little kids, what a wonderful patriotic act that was. And I grow up and I think about it and I say, hey, that was terrorism. Yeah, nobody was killed, but that was terrorism. They teach us about, but this is another level. This is another level. This is they believe that there was a hit song in Israel called Ha'olam Kulo Negdenu, which means the whole world is against us. I could send you a link. It's on YouTube. They have kids, choirs singing about how the whole world is against us. They all want to kill us. They always did. They always will. We don't give a damn about them either. And they can all Shatelech Lazazel. The song ends. They can all go to hell.
Oh, nice.
And they have like kids choirs singing this. This is the Zionist paranoia. They want to keep all the Jews in a state of in a state of fear, and that they're the only salvation for the Jews. Right. That anybody that gets in the way of Zionism is putting the Jews in danger. Anybody who is against Zionism wants Jews to be weak. You see how they talk, right? How Kahane talks, how Netanyahu talks. If they would be right, if their delusion would be true, or that's all you need to get somebody to feel that, hey, anybody who's against Israel, not Israel's policies, Zionism, anybody who's against Zionism wants Jews to be weak, wants us to go back to concentration camps. Otherwise, why would they not want us to be able to defend ourselves? All you need to be you can even be an anti-Zionist in theory. All you need is to believe that paranoia. In 1971, Stuart Alsop, he was a Newsweek journalist. He went to Golda Meir and he told her that, he writes about this, and he told her that you have a Masada complex. He was telling her the reason you can, like Kahane said, the reason why you can't get together with the Arabs, that's what they called them in those days, and make peace is because you have Masada. Masada was an outpost of actual thugs, Baryonim, we call them, thugs, who hold up during the destruction of the Second Temple, the war with the Romans, in a fortress, abandoned Roman fortress called Masada. And at the end, the Romans surrounded it, and all the people in Masada committed suicide, except for a couple of survivors who hid amongst the dead bodies who told the story. Now, these people were thugs, Baryonim. They were chased out of Jerusalem because they were thugs against the Jews in Jerusalem. And he told Golda Meir, you have a Masada complex. This idea, that's what he told her. Yeah. So he writes that she looked at me with this eye and said, Masada complex. Yes, we, now she's talking in the name of the Jews. We have a Masada complex. We have a pogrom complex. We have a Holocaust complex. This is, now, normally people consider complexes baggage that they go to psychologists to get rid of, right? But this is part of their identity. This is like their living. This is Holocaust studies and everything that seems good about Zionism masquerades as good. And if you look at it under the hood, you'll find this type of stuff really driving it. Holocaust studies, it's great in theory. Let everybody learn the lessons of the Holocaust. I'm all for that. The problem is that the Holocaust studies curriculum always ends with Israel. That's the last chapter, State of Israel. Kids go to Auschwitz to visit Auschwitz, and they come out crying, but with Israeli flags draped over their backs, right? And all of this, Holocaust memorials, all of these things are wonderful, except that the bottom line of these things, the end game is all, okay, now we have Israel. Israel's Independence Day, Yom HaAtzmaut is Hey, I think it's this coming Saturday. The Holocaust, the Israeli Holocaust Memorial Day was, I think, just last week. They put the Holocaust Memorial Day, it was the day of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and they chose that day to juxtapose it right before Israel Independence Day to create a before and after scenario. We have the Holocaust one week, next week we have Israel. One week they're mourning, the next week they're celebrating. With Holocaust, Israel, that's the contrast, and that's the binary choice every Jew has. Either Israel, Zionism, or Holocaust. And yes, these religious Jews may say, you know what, yes, Netanyahu, he's not religious. Yes, he doesn't like religion. Yes, he has a daughter who became religious and he's ashamed of her. I saw that a rabbi wrote that in an article. How he has pictures of all his kids on his desk except for her. This is what I read. But one way or another, yes. But the bottom line is, who's going to defend us? Who's going to defend us from all the Palestinian Nazis that want to kill us, because it says in the Quran to kill all the Jews and the Arabs and the whole world. And this is the Middle East. You heard Kahane, right? This is the Middle East. And how many times have you heard that from Zionists? And they only understand one language, and they only understand the strong hand. And if you believe that, then how far are you from being a Baruch Goldstein? You know, how far are you from being a Meir Kahane? It's you know, I am all for getting rid of terrorists. Hang them all by their thumbs. All of them. The terrorists, bad. Absolutely, right? Hamas, bad. Absolutely. But this attitude, Kahane's attitude, his mindset, his outlook is it's so wrong and so perverse. It's not even going to gain Kahane anything.
Right.
And it didn't. It's not like he says, I want to rob a bank and you know, he's going to become rich. Look where this led him. It didn't even if he's a narcissist, this didn't help him in his narcissism. It got him killed, him and his son. It got them killed.
Yeah. Well, we have to have you on again because there's so much more to talk about, including, we can't talk about it now, but I did see someone in the comments, because we have to end because my dog is going crazy. And also because this is great, but we're almost on 3 hours because you're a rabbi, so you are very good at textual analysis and explicating things. So we'll have to do another session, but next time we have to talk about, because someone in the comments was like, Judaism and pacifism, has he not read the Old Testament? Obviously you've read the Torah, but we'll talk about that on another episode. We can do a whole deep dive into that. And any final words from you for this episode? We'll have you on again very shortly. Obviously.
Yeah, I just want to mention, you know, that look, anybody's death is a tragedy, and but Kahane's life was more tragic. It was tragic. Not only was his death tragic, his life was tragic. I hear, was a smart guy once upon a time, but he took a terrible turn somewhere, and I just want everybody to learn a lesson from his life, you know, that his path leads to where his path led, you know, and nobody, don't do it. Just stay away from that. Stay away from that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I don't think that one of my audience will is attracted towards that, but they may have friends and relatives who are. So this is a useful essay. Yeah. And I'm sure you know a lot of people who, yeah.
If I could meet those kids in Crown Heights, this is what I would tell them, you know?
Right. Gotta have an intervention.
Defend yourself 100%, but don't go chasing ladies down the street with.
It's ridiculous.
With whatever those. No, and you know, even that Lubavitch spokesman agrees.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, Rabbi, thank you so much. Until shortly, we'll have to have you back on again, and have a great night. Katie. And everyone read his book.
It was great to be here. Thanks again, as always.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye. That was great. Love talking to the rabbi. I think he wants to say one more thing.
No, I said I'm not supposed to log off now, right?
Oh, no, you can. He can, right, Brad? Yeah, he can. You can. You can, yeah. That's when we're uploading. A lot of times,
you know, they.
I know, because that's when we're uploading it. Yeah, but you can, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Rabbi.
See you, Katie.
Good night. Okay, that was great. Gonna quickly read the super chats, and everyone, really, his book is amazing. Okay, OMG, been loving the rabbi. His book, hard to get unless hardcover for over $64. Is he planning on an Audible? Would he consider doing a Q&A session? Okay, Rabbi, you're still here, so you can answer that one, actually.
Yeah, gladly.
All right.
We'll talk about it, Katie.
All right. Exposed Kufi, largest target of pro-Israel organization in the United States with over 10 million members, Christians United for Israel. Yeah, we should do a show on that. An Open Door, Jewish Rescue in the Philippines. It is written, produced, and directed by award-winning filmmaker Noel M. Izon. That sounds really interesting. Philip Blair gifted 1 Katie Halper membership. Thank you, Philip. Bits, can Chabad be considered Zionist friendly? I'll let the rabbi answer that if he's still here. Wow, thanks, Philip. Gifted 5 Katie Halper memberships. And Brian Frederick, thanks for another fantastic show, Katie. You are the best part of independent media. Oh, thank you so much.
What was the question?
If Chabad can be considered Zionist friendly.
Chabad officially, ideologically, on the books is very anti-Zionist. The problem is its Zionist friendliness is because it's very right-wing where it comes to questions of security and stuff like that. But the idea, and that's the gateway ideology into Zionism, to appreciating Zionism. But officially, it's a problem. Look, they don't have a rabbi anymore, so they really don't have a leader.
That's an intervention from you, not me. I mean, I was joking about me, but yeah. And then you got to give me a course. I was telling you this, that you got to give me a course so I know how to recognize different organizations by I mean, that gets into a somewhat can be kind of scary territory because you don't want to point to someone's whatever.
Right. Well, you know what that's like. I'll tell you what it's like. It's like, British people dress a certain way.
Yeah.
Europeans dress a certain way. And if you really don't know it, you won't notice it.
Right.
It's the same type of thing over here.
And
as a general rule, it a lot of times works.
Is the payas worn by a certain group?
Lubavitches don't have them. No, they're worn by many groups, but Lubavitch is not one of them.
Okay. Could you have them? Have you had them?
I don't, but in theory, I could.
You could. It's just a decision. It's not because of it's not a requirement.
There are some groups that all have them. All Satmas have them, and other Hasidic sects, and many of the Lithuanians have them. Usually, they put them behind their ears. But Lubavitch, for whatever reason, and that's a valid question, Lubavitch do not have them.
All right, great. So we can do a fashion show next time. Hair and makeup show. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. I think we're definitely going to give you a Patreon this week that's about, oh my God, I'm really tired. My brain is, Epstein. But there was so much good stuff here. Brad, can I throw you on the screen for a second? Take your gum out. Tell me when you're ready. All right, there we go. We may have to Patreon some of this because there was a lot. And Brad's always a fan of erring on the side of more rather than less Patreon.
That is true. I am an ardent advocate for that.
Yeah, so we may do that. Also, I do want to say that it goes without say, I guess. And obviously, we're going to be focusing on this shortly, but we should note that Israel is continuing its genocide. It is, people like to say that their people are being starved, or they're facing starvation. No. The people of Gaza are being starved intentionally by Israel. I'm just going to tell people.
There was. I'm sorry, I don't have it at the ready. I can prepare it for next week. But there was a video clip from Israeli TV from members of the Knesset, not only acknowledging that the Palestinians were being starved, but saying, "Yes, I am going to starve them."
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's helpful when they're so honest. It's sick, it's sadistic, it's sociopathic, but it's going to be good for the genocide case. That's the silver lining of this. I mean, it's beyond. It's like the fact that this isn't on every news channel all the time. That the people of Gaza are being starved. Democracy Now! Headline reads that 65,000 Palestinian children suffer acute malnutrition. Also, Israeli airstrikes across the Gaza Strip have killed at least 13 Palestinians today. This was the headline on the 29th. One day after Israel attacks killed 48 others, including 5 children. Killed on a Gaza City street in an Israeli drone strike. Separately, 4 Palestinians were killed, 3 of them children, when Israel bombed a tent camp for displaced people near Khan Yunis. It's the latest attack by Israel in an area its military is designated as a so-called safe zone. So don't forget to talk about this. It's being normalized. It's background noise. You would never know. You know, Aaron Mate and I do this show Monday morning where we watch the Sunday morning news shows so that you don't have to, and you would not know that there is a starvation campaign going on right now on a live streamed genocide. And Amnesty International just very recently condemned the United States for supporting a live stream genocide.
I look forward to Congress saying that Amnesty International is Hamas.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, they already have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Xanthimus, for the clips. Thank you, of course, Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Greg. Thank you to all the viewers and supporters. Make sure you become Patreon supporters at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show so you can see this entire thing because there's going to be a lot of stuff. And I think that's about it, right?
Is Bucky on your lap?
Oh, Bucks, come here. Bucks, come here. I'll take you out. Come here. Come on.
I need.
Come here. I know. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. I'm going to have to go off cam to get him. Hold on. Come here. Bucky, come here. It's your friend Brad. You love Brad.
We got to change her audio avatar. Am I right?
Okay, here he is. Oh. Sorry, Bucky. Ow.
Oh my.
Oh, he's mad at me because I really took him out.
Because why?
Because I have to take him out. Look at how cute he is. Oh, his handsome bow tie.
Oh.
You're so handsome. And he smells good. My friend gave him a bath. Hi, Rick, if you're watching. Thanks for the bath. And thanks, Aunt Elaine, for the bow tie. All right, Bucks, you want to say goodbye to them with me?
Okay. We
Oh my God, he really wants to go out. All right, I'll take you out. All right. I love him so much.
We need to make him like your audio avatar.
Yeah, we do.
Something like that.
But don't forget Bodie, guys. Bodie's still around. Bodie's
No.
just my parents.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will see you guys. I know. Why is it so funny? I will see you guys next week.
Okay. Love you guys.
Love you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, I'm down. You got limits, man. You got limits, man.